Sergeant Stevenson and his colleagues are not the only police to brush with the supernatural. The long arm of the law also reached for the unknown in August 1966, when reporters, television cameramen, and 1,000 onlookers flocked to an ordinary suburban street in the Melbourne suburb of East Oakley. For 3 days, the huge crowd trampled on the nature strips and stared expectantly at a small weatherboard house. Inside, a small party of neighbors and police were grappling with a poltergeist. Constable Lloyd Sherlock was called to the scene by police radio. He spent an entire night in the house and wrote down everything that happened. 20 years later, he's no closer to finding a logical explanation.
I was taking a name, address and all that sort of thing for the police report. Started on the wall, which seemed to be on the outside. And then from the west side wall, it went to the front door, and then it followed around the house. And after a while, it was rapping on the back door, and the back door was... And I recorded all these different positions on the only bit of paper I had, which was a previous message.
So you're sitting in this room 20 years ago, and you hear knocking coming from all over the house.
Yes.
Different directions,
yes.
Within seconds of each other.
Split seconds. One second would be on one corner of the house, and then the next is as fast as light perhaps could travel on the other side of the house.
So in investigating that, did you come up with any logical explanation?
Nothing. Even after 20 odd years, it still amazes me.
What was the closest you ever got to the sound?
The closest was on the back door. It was a flush panel door, and I had my hand on the doorknob, and I could sense and hear this knocking on the outside. Open the door, nothing there.
Did the sound stop?
Yeah, it stopped as though it was beating me. To me, it seemed as though he or she or what it was knew I was going to open that door.
So this entity or whatever it was that was knocking on the house seemed to have some intelligence attached to it.
I reckon it did. The only thing I can put it down is something supernatural, something unexplained.
While we were filming at the site, a next-door neighbor told us that he had been inside the house when the poltergeist activity first erupted, before the crowds and police first arrived. He agreed to tell us his story on condition that we conceal his identity.
Well, I have seen 2 or 3 lights, only about 8 inches long, similar to a small fluorescent lighting. And I've seen that on about 3 occasions, and on different nights.
Were these lights moving?
Absolutely.
Inside the house?
Inside the house. The taps were always going on and off, mainly staying on all the time. At one stage there, I did get a spanner and tighten them up, and I defied anybody to have turned them on without using a spanner, but they still went on. Something or someone turned them on. Seen the bed being more or less rocked like a rocker, and then at times the kids just getting jumped up and down, thumped up and down as if you were pushing the bed up and down all the time.
Is there any way the children could have been doing that themselves?
No, no way in the world, no way in the world.
So did it appear as if some other force was doing it?
Absolutely.
What was the state of the children when this was happening?
Oh, they were in a bad way, a real bad way.
Poltergeists are rarer than conventional hauntings, and they seem to have a much more devastating effect on those who suffer them at close quarters. It took the woman and her 2 daughters several years to fully recover from the experience. But when they moved out of the house, the activity suddenly stopped.
Poltergeist cases, like the one we've just seen, have got nothing to do with ghosts whatsoever. They centre around a particular person rather than a particular place, like this 13-year-old girl that I've got on the screen. In her presence, things appeared and disappeared mysteriously, and objects were thrown around the room. She believed that it was a devil, Dracu, who was doing it, and occasionally when he got annoyed with her, he would bite her and scratch her, like these marks that you see on the cheek at the moment. I've investigated 12 poltergeist cases, 6 of which turned out to be genuine. What interests me very much is how that poltergeist subject differs from an ordinary person. And the answer seems to be that they're bottling up an intense emotion like anger, and nothing of it is getting out. When I succeed in getting them to release that anger, the disturbances stop. Some investigators have been more interested in the energy dynamics. What they do is to plot the movements in relation to the poltergeist subject. When you do that, this kind of diagram of the movements results. From the information, the type of energy field that could be producing the movements can be worked out. The energy appears to be swirling around the person, building up and collapsing as it does so, something like an electric fan rotating and blowing pieces of paper about. Poltergeist energy is being explored for its military applications. The Russians, for example, have someone who can stop a frog's heart beating using such energy. It seems that in poltergeist cases at least, it's the special power of a living person which produces the disturbance. But that's not the traditional explanation for a ghost. Some people with religious views believe that evil spirits or demons can haunt a house and are hostile and destructive towards living people in it. To investigate this possibility, we must go to a former hospital 97 kilometres east of Perth.